Hi, I'm Mollie. I'm moderating the Q&A, and please welcome editor extraordinaire Meg Reticker.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming out tonight. It's really a treat to see this movie with an audience. I have to say, we watched it in my apartment to get ready for this, and it was not the same. So, thank you.
First time I'd seen it probably in like 10, 15 years. Yeah.
And how did it hold up?
I think it's great. I mean, it's very absurd, and it brings back a lot of memories, obviously. It's great to see it in a theater, though. I think that's really special, which I haven't seen since it came out, probably in 2001. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy looking back and thinking about when these movies came out in theaters. It makes you realize what we're missing these days. Yeah. And again, thank you to the Metrograph for hosting us. Before we get into the movie, I want to go back a little bit and talk about you.
Sure.
How did you know that you wanted to be an editor?
I really didn't, but I'd always loved film. And, one of the things that I was noticing tonight was just how this film is kind of a dedication to film in a lot of ways, with all these, sort of the cliches that happen in all these summer films or these, teenage screwball comedies or whatever you want to call them. But I had, always loved film and taken a lot of film courses in college, but I actually studied history. But of course, I think being a history major, it's like, well, what do you do with that? And I didn't want to be an academic, but I'd come to New York. I had a sister that worked in film. And so I started just working on sets, and I really did enjoy it that much, as a PA, hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait. And then I got a job, actually, in an editing room. And, I'd say in the first week, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is where I belong. So right away, and I started working mainly on doc. And, I really love documentary. And then I slowly, crept into fiction. I did a little sound editing. All of it was on film. And then, of course, I'd say, probably the mid-'90s or late '90s, we, transitioned into digital. So, yeah.
Great. And how did you get connected to this movie?
We talked about that, and how is it that I came to get this job? It's hard to even remember how I got this job. I do know that the community was much smaller at that time, as far as the film community, and I had done a number of independent films, and so I do think I had some success with this film called Heavy, and I had done a bunch of indie films, and I think my name was probably out there. But honestly, this film was very unusual. And I think the reason it was so unusual is because it was an independent film. But, the independent films of the 90s were they were cool films, they were dark and angsty and all that. So this film just didn't make sense. It's sort of like, what? And then, there's not a lot of big stars, but, I remember reading the script and loving it because it was so weird and absurd. But and I was like, oh, David Hyde Pierce, Chris Maloney, he was, in that show, the cop show. That's all I knew, and obviously also Janine Garofalo too. I knew who she was, but and Paul Rudd. But most of the people we did not know. I did not know any of those people. None of those people. I mean, Amy Poehler and Bradley Cooper. Of course, David Wayne and Michael Showalter and Michael Ian Black. They had been doing The State. So they were you kind of knew who they were. But I think in a lot of ways, too, because it was this indie film that felt like it was hard to play. So it did have a theatrical, but I think people didn't know what to make of it. And the reviews were terrible, So I think, it was just destined to be a cult classic, And people probably watched it more on DVD, is what I'd say, or VHS or whatever, probably DVD.
That's how I remember becoming aware of it, is people just sort of passed it around. And I don't know, when I saw it, I was one of those kids who loved summer camp. And so when I saw this movie, it was like, how did they know? The bender when they go into town is so exactly spot on with what it feels like when you go to town.
Yes.
So I don't know, I wonder, some of these scenes have become so iconic. I mean, I think of that scene, I think of the scene with Paul Rudd sulking around the the mess hall, I think of Mollie Shannon with the kids.
Yes.
Did those stand out at the time? I'm always curious what you know when you're cutting and what you don't really discover until an audience is reacting to it.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because everybody always has their favorite scene, you know, and a lot of it, you know, like the Paul Rudd and the tray business, like I didn't, you know, read that. I didn't know what that was going to be. And I do recall like making it much more cutty than it was. And I remember David Wayne being like, oh, don't cut it. Don't cut it. Let it be. Let him play the part. And it really was really funny. So that was something I did anticipate. But I mean, a lot of that stuff, depending, you know, like I love the Mollie Shannon and arts and crafts because that was so weird. And, you know, as we were cutting it, we obviously had to tighten it. And we were, you know, it's like one big skit, but then we were like sort of intercutting all the scenes for rhythms and, you know, to make it work. And I just remember, don't cut the arts and crafts, don't cut the arts and crafts. But, you know, of course, going to town is always amazing. Or, you know, like Coop, you know, doing the moment, the Rocky moment, I would call it, or whatever. And we did use the Rocky theme for most of the rough cut. So, but yeah, you never really knew, but we did screen it and screen it and screen it and screen it. So we kind of knew. We generally went to NYU a lot with the NYU students because that's where Michael and David had gone to school. So yeah.
Yeah, it feels like a film that wants a young audience too. That makes sense.
Yeah. So we kept on honing it, you know, to get the laughs where they should be.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in test screenings. So
definitely.
I wonder what came out. What did you take out of the movie? Do you remember how did those screenings shape this?
You know, it mainly, obviously, because it's a low budget film, you know, it was a film that we shot in 28 days, which it rained 23 of those days. It was so wet. Anyway, it was truly wet.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Well, and some of the I didn't notice until I saw it on a big screen, but you can see the rain in some of the shots. Like you can see it raining out the windows when you're in the interiors.
It was like constant. It was cold and wet. It really was. But I mean, a lot of this stuff, it's hard to know. It's just like literally tightening here, there, and everywhere. You know, the end, the 10 years later went on forever. We didn't include that. I don't know if you remember in the beginning, the tape of the kid masturbating was found. We took that out.
Probably for the best.
But, you know, for the most part, it was just really moving things around and creating these vignettes that you go back and forth with. That was the main thing. But, you know, the thing that I always like, when you're looking at the film, you're just like, it was really low budget, but it's kind of genius the way that they shot it because, you know, they didn't have a lot of time and, you know, you can't set up shots. And it was pretty brilliant, just the same. We only crossed the line a few times.
Well, and you, from what I understand, you were on set. They shot it all at a summer camp, and you were there. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit what it was like. I know it was wet and cold.
Yes. So that was kind of interesting because, again, I was on set, and I was in the nurses' quarters. So I kind of felt like I was a little bit, and also, too, when you go on set, a lot of the time, I feel like you're with the crew, but you have totally different hours. But they were partying big time on this crew, and I do recall that the art department, because they were there for long, because everybody stayed in these bunks, and the art department had decked out their bunk. I think they even had a jukebox in it or something like that. So there were parties at the art department's bunk, and I remember going to them, but kind of feeling like a nerd because I really didn't know the crew. I also do recall it was so cold that I do remember going to, you know, Walmart for the first time, and just because, you know, I'd never heard of Walmart, but they had a Walmart out there, and just buying all these, you know, long underwear and everything. And of course, we were cutting on Avid, and it was old school Avid back then.
Yeah, what was Avid like in 2000?
Yeah, 2000. Well, first of all, I have to point out that, you know, the drives, you'd work with drives. The drives were each 9 gigs, and they were like this. Like each 9 gig was like that, like a little box. But you generally work from anywhere from 72 to 120 gigs on a film, which wasn't a lot. So you couldn't hold a lot of, you know, you'd sort of take in all the material at a very low res, and every time you had a screening, you would have to, you know, dump all the media, and then you'd have to, what do we call it? You know, you had to bring it back in.
Up-res it.
Up-res it. That's what we used to call it. You had to up-res it, so that, because it could only hold the film at an uprise, so that when you'd have these screenings. So every time we had a screening, it was extremely stressful, because, if the Avid would crash. But yeah, I mean, that was the main thing, is just the amount of footage that you could hold into that. And obviously you were crashing all the time.
You touched on this a little bit, but I want to talk a little more about the cast. Bradley Cooper's very first movie.
Yes.
Amy Poehler was not on SNL yet.
She was not.
Paul Rudd had been on Clueless.
Right.
I think this must have been, I didn't look this one up, but it must have been very early in Elizabeth Banks's career.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing her. And
Yeah.
I think Mollie Shannon we had seen.
Yes.
Everybody loved Mollie Shannon, by the way, on this set. She was just very friendly with everybody. Yeah, and I remember actually on the way there, taking the bus with Amy Poehler, who had just come in from Chicago, and she had been on Second City, and she literally had just moved to New York.
Amazing.
So it was like none of these people had these careers. But I think, again, like a lot of people also asked me, oh, well, is this written or is it improv? And I'd say most of it was, written. I mean, there's a few things that are there, like, Janine Garofalo with the names, when she's naming all the campers. Or I think when there was also, when Michael Ian Black says we should meet at 9:15, and because I have 2 other appointments, that was improvised. But for the most part, it was all written, and it's a testament to say that so much about comedy is the writing. It's like all the rhythms, everything, and Michael Showalter and David Wayne had co-wrote it together, and it was pretty tight. So I think that. The only thing that was improv was a lot of these people came from improv, and I think coming from improv just gave them some comfort. There was a comfort on the set, in the shots. You can see it, you can kind of feel it. There was, they were just used to being around each other. They did some rehearsals, but I think that's what made. It's not that there is improv in it, but their comfort level is really there.
Yeah, it really sells that all these people have been going to camp together their whole lives. Like, you really believe it.
Yeah.
They feel like genuine friends. They feel comfortable together.
Definitely.
I want to call out also, there's some people who had huge careers behind the scenes after this movie. Michael Showalter is a big director now. He directed The Big Sick and Eyes of Tammy Faye. Teddy Shapiro, who wrote the music, writes the music for Severance and won an Emmy. A.D. Miles, who was the redhead sort of sidekick to Christopher Maloney, was the head writer for The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon.
Right.
So it was like...
John Benjamin is the can of vegetables.
Yes. It's really extraordinary looking at this and thinking about all this talent was captured in this moment in time on this wet, rainy summer camp. Was it in the air, or was it just like, these are a bunch of horny dudes partying? Well,
I mean, I will say at the time, I'm just going to be, honest about it. I was like, oh, this is just dick humor, whatever. I mean, I like this film, and, in a lot of ways, it's a guy film or something like that. But, it totally grows on you, and I think it's like one long skit, and it's very, and there were female characters that were really good too. And I think, there's a lot to it, and I think humor in a lot of ways is very subjective, obviously. I think about, okay, what makes something funny? I don't know, we don't always agree on it. And I think a lot of times it can be absurd, it can be, broad humor, it can be, there's so many different types of humor, But honestly, I go back and every time I watch this, I really love it, and so many people love it too, which I think the great thing about this film is it's sort of, it's somebody said like a comfortable couch. It, it's familiar to you, and I think also too it's a film that you can talk during. You can be with a group of people. You won't get shushed when you watch it. It's just that film that you just really can enjoy.
You're probably stoned.
I hope so. I hope you're stoned.
You again touched on this a little bit. I want to circle back to it. The film's really made up of vignettes, and it feels like creating momentum, keeping the story moving forward must have been a big part of the edit. And I wonder if you could talk about, either in this film or in general, how you approach sort of weaving comedy together and where to start scenes and where to end scenes.
Right. Well, honestly, yeah, that was the biggest challenge is the structuring, and that's something that we worked on a lot. And it's one day, So, and time is this issue, but we were, I think doc editing, actually, that's where I got my start, really in structure is something that I really truly enjoy. So constantly moving things around. And you're kind of moving in a, sort of trying to heighten it as we're moving towards the Skylab and the talent show. So we're just constantly tweaking things and to, increase the rhythms. But I think, I think, even in every film you work in, a lot of features, is really about you put the assembly together, and then I always like to say, and then you cut off the heads and the tails of the scenes. Because you don't want every scene beginning, starting, and ending. You don't want resolve. So this is a big lesson in that, because it's like, otherwise you just get this sort of, the film just being sort of one note, and you don't want to stay ahead of the viewer, so there's so many reasons why you want to cut in on action or cut the heads and tails, because you don't want resolve is the main thing.
You've cut a lot of comedy in addition to this movie. You did, I think, wait, hang on, I looked it up, I wrote it down, now my note cards are sticking together. 50 episodes of 30 Rock.
Yep. Yeah.
3 Emmy nominations, 1 Ace Eddie Award. What else can you tell us about cutting comedy? How do you approach comedy versus other genres? Is there anything that comes to mind or anything you think is particularly important?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me about, how do you cut comedy? But I think, honestly, again, I just go back to the writing. And, I think you lean heavy on the writing in comedy, and I think it really dictates a lot of the rhythms. Like I said, everything is about the rhythms and, where you're going with the edit. And I think also, too, it's beyond the writing. I think there's also generally like an actor or actors that really get the sort of tone and the rhythms of the show. And I think like on 30 Rock, Alec Baldwin was amazing. Just following his lead. I'll always choose one actor that I feel like, or the actor is really good, that you're sort of following what they're doing. I think Alec Baldwin was a big part of it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it, but I don't think it's necessarily any different than any other film. Like every movie or every television show that you work on has its own rhythms and its own tone, and I think you're always, as you begin, working and editing a show, you're looking for the rhythms. And you're on a TV show, whether there's multiple editors, you're like, everybody's trying to figure out what the rhythms of that show may be, and you're talking about it and you're thinking about it. So you're sort of discovering that. So whether it's comedy or not, that's what you're looking for. But I will say that, not that good writing is important in everything, but the writing really does bring out a lot of the comedy. That's why I think when people assume, there was no improvisation on 30 Rock. People assume there's improvisation, but once you take away those words, because they're written in a certain rhythm, so if you take away and you start improvising, that's taking away the rhythm of the way it was written. Mm-hmm. Often.
I love that. Well, and I remember, so I edited a bunch of episodes of Stella, which is this same team, and Janine, thank you, and Janine Garofalo was a guest star, and I remember Showalter saying, she just understands what we do. And I think you can see that in this too. She reminds me of sort of the way you talk about Alec Baldwin, is she understands the sort of playing the absurdity, but with an emotional sincerity, but then just a little bit of a wink. So I feel like you can really see that tone at play at this movie. And it goes back to what you said at the beginning, which is like, it plays with so many tropes that's part of why we love it and still resonate with it. It's all that.
Definitely. I have to give a shout out to Zach Orth too, because this screening, for some reason, he really stuck out, how he was the glue in a lot of ways.
He's really good.
Yeah. And that was the first time when we screened it, that, Judah Freelander was in it. At the time, I had no idea who that was. And then I was like, oh yeah, Judah Freelander's in this film. He's playing Ron. So that was kind of cool. And also David Wayne said to say hey to everybody. So hey from David Wayne.
I know we don't have a ton of time, and I want to give you guys a chance to ask questions. I think we have a Metrograph team who can see better than I can, who are going to pick some audience questions.
Hey, Meg, got a question. Hey, got a question regarding the vase breaking sound effect. Was that something found in the mix, or something found in the offline?
I'm sorry, the what?
The vase breaking sound effect.
Oh yeah, I mean honestly, the mix. today was a little bit quiet on the sound effects. No, that's something that we definitely created, the in the mix. That was planned.
There's a lot of sound jokes.
There's a lot of sound jokes.
Editing jokes too. Like
Tons of editing jokes.
They really like to play with the filmmaking sound, stunt guy jokes, like
continuity jokes everywhere. Things are happening in the background.
Yeah.
All the time. Yeah.
What else? I can't see, so yeah.
Hey, how you doing? I have a question. When you're putting together a movie like this for the first time, you have all this footage. Are you starting from the very beginning? You have a script, obviously, or do you have like certain scenes where you have focused on first? Like how'd you start on a movie like this to start putting together, if you remember?
Well, like I said, I was on set, right? So I'm kind of cutting dailies as they go along, and of course, it's rare, and in this case, you never shoot things or rarely shoot things in chronological order. So it was sort of like I was cutting things together on set, making rough assemblies, and David Wayne would visit me, sometimes at night, but I was just, trying to get as much done as I could. And to get to that assembly point. And then, once you have assembly, you're like, oh God, this sucks. And then you keep on going, you keep on going, you keep on going.
Who else is out there?
Hi. This is one of my most rewatched movies, one of my favorite movies, so thank you for it.
Thank you.
I'm also rewatching 30 Rock, coincidentally, and rewatching this reminded me just how many lines you can catch on repeated viewings. I was wondering if there's any lines that you noticed tonight that you're like, oh, that's really funny. I wish there was a bit more of a spotlight on that. There's not one line in particular tonight, but I do. All the sort of being at a Jewish camp really hit me tonight for some reason. Like it hit me really strong because I was like, wow, that is very cool. Like for example, the whole Godspell thing when they're performing that. It's supposed to be, I don't know, a lot of people don't get this, but the reason they boo is because the cross. You know what I mean? Like, oh, they're not going to go in because suddenly there's this, even though they're the most obviously talented people, but yeah, no, I think that was the thing that really hit me. I'm trying to think if there's one line. I don't know, 30 Rock, there's more, I'm more into the lines because I feel like, don't go to a second location with a hippie, that kind of stuff. There's just a lot of memorable lines. But here, there's great lines, but there's no one line in particular.
Hey, Meg.
Hey, Juniper.
You talked about the writing of the script. Was the beginning and the end always like a focus on Coop and I'm forgetting the other actress's name, but was the focus always like kind of like focused like more on those two characters, or like when you were like going through like the edit? Were there cuts where like you would kind of end or begin the movie like highlighting certain characters, because it's a huge like kind of like macabre of like really zany characters, and it's like having to flesh all of them out in order to make them feel distinct, but then also having some kind of like conclusion at the end of it. Like, what was your thought process with David and like the other filmmakers in order to like come to that?
I think that Coop and Kayni were definitely, the bedrock of the film, and like their story is the A story, so to speak. And so you're always moving everything around that. So that was always the case. And I will say that Michael Showalter, who was the co-writer, was in the editing room every day. So, when you're editing somebody who's in the film, that's often difficult, because they're seeing their performance and they're very picky about their performance. But he was amazing. And I will say both David, who's also an editor, by the way, so that was that difficulty, because I've got an editor and then I've got the actor who's in the room all the time. And those were my two biggest, sort of barriers or difficulties, was having the editor and the main actor in my room constantly, and they never left the room either, by the way. So, but also the music was really interesting too, because there's all these '80s like trashy bands and everything, and trying to get the rights for things. So that was difficult as well. Yeah.
I feel like the score manages to get the spirit of it.
Yeah, definitely. And Craig Wedren, who was actually in that band, who's also a composer in that band, Shudder to Think, wrote a lot of the music as well with, Theodore Shapiro.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Teddy Shapiro. Yeah.
Cool. Other questions? Yeah.
We go up front.
Sorry, I'm not supposed to be calling on people.
So I found out about this movie accidentally my freshman year of high school from accidentally watching the TV show first, the 10 Years Later show. So did you work on that show, or do you think it stacks up to the movie?
Yeah, I did not work on it, but I will say, I was like, no way is that show going to be any good. And I will say, I think it's amazing. Rob Nassau worked on it, but I generally did watch it and loved it. So I just didn't think they could pull it off. And obviously it's a prequel, just so you know. That was probably shot, 15 years later or something like that? So that was kind of funny.
I loved it too, and I think they did some of what they also do, you see in this movie, where they just leaned into all of the absurdities in the opposite direction,
Yeah.
Instead of trying to de-age them or make it fit to now, they were just like, nope, we're going to say it's 10 years earlier and everyone's going to be 15 years older and you are going to laugh. And
Exactly.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got one right up here.
Do you remember what scene you felt like you had established your rhythm with the movie and editing, and then rewatching it now, are you reminded of that at all?
Obviously, I have to mention the scene too where they trashed the infirmary. I just love that scene for some reason. I don't know why, and obviously there's only one take of that because it's a low budget film, and then once they did it, they couldn't rebuild that set. But there's a lot of scenes. I mean, I think, obviously going to town was a scene that I felt like, okay, I've got it. This is really great, and it's just, that's one of a lot of people's favorite scene. It's my favorite scene. I think also the coupe, I don't know, Rocky moment too. The montage, yeah. I really love that as well. And actually, you know what? I do love the arts and crafts with Mollie Shannon, because the film kind of slows down there, and they were always trying to cut it down, and but I really love those scenes, So
It does. It makes me miss montages, this movie. I mean, there's not a lot of montages these days, and I
that's
love
true.
them.
Well, it's because they can be really cheesy, So that's and also of course the motorcycle with Ken Marino and that whole thing, which kind of is illustrating how ridiculous montages are. I mean, that's all about how montages are just cheats and ridiculous and all that.
Yeah, totally. I see somebody in the middle back there.
Hi, Meg. I just wanted to say it was an amazing job with the film.
Thank you.
And I think it's so interesting what you noted earlier, that it wasn't necessarily humor that you aligned with. And I feel like comedy is so intuitive. So I feel like you did such a great job cutting it. So I'm curious, moving forward, what lessons did you take from cutting this film into future comedies?
It's interesting. What am I taking forward? I mean, obviously, when you're working on something, you have to be open to the material and look at the direction that the creator, the director is going. And I think, but in general, the one thing I take forward with this film is really looking at a director's vision, and I'm just so wanting that right now. I mean, I don't know if this is really necessarily answering your question, but I feel like there's so many remakes and sequels and all that stuff. It just felt so good because Michael and David really had a vision for the film, and I think that it's to kind of, you're going on a ride when you're working with these directors or showrunners, and it's just so fun to go on that ride, and I feel like I was going on the ride with them of the story that they were trying to tell, and they were, like I said, really passionate about what they were doing. So I think taking away is just every job you take is to go on this journey with people that are trying to tell their story, and that's the beauty of being an editor, is going on these different journeys.
Could you talk more about intercutting within the scenes, if they're
right. Well, that part of it wasn't locked in, right?
Got it.
So the way in which we kind of cut these vignettes, they were probably more together at one point. That was kind of through the editing we started to intercut the various vignettes. That was something we discovered in the editing.
Could you mention some examples?
I mean, everything. I mean, I think from I mean, Capture the Flag, for example. That Capture the Flag was just one scene, you know? And the fact that we have it sort of being all these things going on around it is like a testament to like, oh, for 1 minute we're like, you know, having Beth talk to the robot dude, and with Amy Poehler and Bradley Cooper getting mad about him being in the talent show. To, you know, there's just so many things happening at the same time during the Capture the Flag. So everything was kind of split up in these small vignettes, and then of course the time cards too. You know, that wasn't in the script either, but that's just a way that we created this device so that you're A, reminded that this is just one day, but two, also kind of giving some structure to the whole piece.
And what was the intercutting? What were you solving with the intercutting? Like, what was the...
Well, then it's just like one, you know, I think, what are you solving? I mean, it's mainly like things that don't work, you know, because the low budget quality of it are just like, you know, I think also too, you really want to keep people, it's almost like creating a cliffhanger in every scene, you know what I mean? You're trying to create this cliffhanger that keeps you interested. Otherwise, if it just plays out in its entirety, it's like ho-hum, but, you know, keeping people engaged and staying ahead of the viewer.
Great. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you to Metrograph. Thank you, Meg.